Chapter 12 of Stuart Little continued. So remember, Stuart Little volunteered to be a substitute in a classroom, and he started the class. The children were very anxious to hear what he had to say. He asked the students what subject they started their day with. The students replied, math. And Stuart decided, no, don't want to start with math. What's the next subject? The students replied, spelling. Stuart said, nope, don't want to do that one either. What's next? So then they said that it was social studies. So social studies is where we left off. Social studies? Never heard of them, said Stuart. Instead of taking up any special subject this morning, why wouldn't it be a good idea if we just talked about something? The scholars glanced around at each other in expectancy. That means that they're wondering what he's going to say next. Could we talk about the way it feels to hold a snake in your hand and then wind itself around your wrist? Asked Arthur Greenlaw. We could, but I'd rather not, replied Stuart. Could we talk about sin and vice? Pleaded Lydia Lacey. Nope, said Stuart. Try again. Could we talk about the fat woman at the circus and she had hair all over her chin? Begged Isidore Feinberg reminiscently. No, said Stuart. I'll tell you. Let's talk about the king of the world. He looked all around the room, hopefully to see how the children liked that idea. There isn't any king of the world, said Harry Jameson in disgust. What's the diff? Said Stuart. There ought to be one. Kings are old-fashioned, said Harry. Well, all right then. Let's talk about the chairman of the world. The world gets into a lot of trouble because it has no chairman. I would like to be the chairman of the world myself. You're too small, said Mary Bendix. Oh, fish feathers, said Stuart. Size has nothing to do with it. It's temperament and ability that count. The chairman has to have ability, and he must know what's important. How many of you know what's important? Up went all the hands. Very good, said Stuart, cocking one leg across the other and shoving his hands in the pockets of his jacket. Henry Rackmeyer, you tell us what is important. A shaft of sunlight at the end of a dark afternoon, a note in music, and the way the back of a baby's neck smells if its mother keeps it tidy, answered Henry. Correct, said Stuart. Those are the important things. You forgot one thing, though. Mary Bendix, what did Henry Rackmeyer forget? He forgot ice cream with chocolate sauce on it, said Mary quickly. Exactly, said Stuart. Ice cream is important. Well, now, if I'm going to be chairman of the world this morning, we've got to have some rules. Otherwise, it will be too confusing with everyone running every which way and helping himself to things and nobody behaving. We've got to have some laws if we're going to play this game. Can anybody suggest any good laws for the world? Albert Fernstrom raised his hand. Don't eat mushrooms. They might be toadstools, suggested Albert. That's not a law, said Stuart. That's merely a bit of friendly advice. Very good advice, Albert, but advice and law are not the same. Law is much more solemn than advice. Solemn means that it's very serious. Law is extremely solemn. Anybody else think of a law for the world? Nix on swiping anything, suggested John Podolsky solemnly. Very good, good law. That means you shouldn't ever take anything that doesn't belong to you. Never poison anything but rats, said Anthony Brindisi. That's no good, said Stuart. It's unfair to rats. A law has to be fair to everybody. Anthony looked sulky. But rats are unfair to us, he said. Here's a little picture of Stuart. Rats are objectionable. I know they are, said Stuart, but from a rat's point of view, poison is objectionable. A chairman has to see all sides to a problem. So objectionable means that they don't quite agree with it. Have you got a rat's point of view? Asked Anthony. You look a little like a rat. No, replied Stuart. I have more the point of view of a mouse, which is very different. I see things whole. It's obvious to me that rats are underprivileged. They've never been able to get out into the open. Rats don't like the open, said Agnes Beretska. That's because whenever they come out, somebody socks them, Rats might like the open if they were allowed to use it. Any other ideas for laws? Agnes Baretska raised her hand. There ought to be a law against fighting. Impractical, said Stuart. Men like to fight, but you're getting warm, Agnes. No scrapping? Asked Agnes timidly. Stuart shook his head. Absolutely no being mean, suggested Mildred Hoffenstein. Very fine law, said Stuart. When I am chairman, anyone who is mean to anybody else is going to catch it. That won't work, remarked Herbert Prendergast. Some people are just naturally mean. Albert Fernstrom is always being mean to me. I'm not saying it will work, said Stuart. It's a good law, and we'll give it a try. We'll give it a try right here and now. Somebody do something mean to somebody. Harry Jameson, you, be mean to Catherine Stableford. Wait a minute now. What's that you've got in your hand, Catherine? It's a little tiny pillow stuffed with sweet balsam. Does it say, for you I pine, for you I balsam on it? Yes, said Catherine. Do you love it very much? Asked Stuart. Yes, I do, said Catherine. Okay, Harry, grab it. Take it away. Harry ran over to where Catherine sat, grabbed the little pillow from her hand, and ran back to his seat while Catherine screamed. Now then, said Stuart in a fierce voice, hold on. There's poor Catherine. Hold on, my good people, while your chairman consults the book of rules. He pretended to thumb through a book. Here we are. Page 492. Absolutely no being mean. Page 560. Nix on swiping anything. Harry Jameson has broken two laws, the law against being mean and the law against swiping. Let's get Harry and set him back before he becomes so mean people will hardly recognize him anymore. Come on. Stuart ran for the yardstick and slid down like a fireman coming down a pole in a firehouse. He ran toward Harry, and the other children jumped up from their seats and raced up and down the aisles and crowded around Harry, while Stuart demanded that he give up the little pillow. Harry looked frightened, although he knew it was just a test. He gave Catherine the pillow. There, it worked pretty well, said Stuart. No being mean is a perfectly good law. He wiped his face with his handkerchief, for he was quite warm from the exertion of being chairman of the world. And there he is sliding down the yardstick. It had taken more running and leaping and sliding than he had imagined. Catherine was very much pleased to have her pillow back. Let's see this little pillow a minute, said Stuart, whose curiosity was beginning to get the better of him. Catherine showed it to him. It was about as long as Stuart was high, and Stuart suddenly thought what a fine, sweet-smelling bed it would make for him. He began to want the pillow himself. That's a very pretty thing, said Stuart. Said Stuart, trying to hide his eagerness. You don't want to sell it, do you? Oh, no, replied Catherine. It was a present to me. I suppose it was given you by a boy you met at Lake Hopatcong last summer, and it reminds you of him, murmured Stuart dreamily. Yes, it was, said Catherine, blushing. Ah, said Stuart, summers are wonderful, aren't they, Catherine? Yes, and last summer was the most wonderful summer I have ever had in my life. I can imagine, said Stuart. You're sure you wouldn't want to sell that little pillow? Catherine shook her head. Don't know as I blame you, replied Stuart quietly. Summertime is important. It's like a shaft of sunlight. Or a note in music, said Elizabeth Acheson. Or the way the back of a baby's neck smells if its mother keeps it tidy, said Marilyn Roberts. Stuart sighed. Never forget your summer times, my dears, he said. Well, I've got to be getting along. It's been a pleasure to know you all. Class is dismissed. Stuart strode rapidly to the door, climbed into the car, and with a final wave of the hand drove off into the northerly direction, while the children raced alongside and screamed, Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. They all wished they could have a substitute every day instead of Miss Gunderson. You can see, there he goes. See him driving off in his little car. And that is the end of chapter 12. I wonder what next adventure he is off to. See you soon.